Really, really happy to have this chance to sit down with Serge Adler, who is the principal percussion and timpanist with Orchestra Toronto. We met several years ago when I started to come to OT, first of all as a guest conductor, and then I found out through Serge, I was really lucky to meet Serge's father, Yefim Adler, a great composer, and I wanted to have this chance to talk with you, Serge, a little bit about your father. What's it like to grow up in a house where your father is a composer? How is it different than somebody else's growing up experience?
Well, growing up as a kid, it was three distinct extremes. Either total silence, nobody say anything, nobody get out of your room. That was in his study, and he was actively composing. Either that wasn't there, he was away in a kind of like a creativity resort. They had several of those sponsored by the Union of Composers in different places, specifically so that people could have privacy and quietude, so they could concentrate on writing. And the third extreme was the house was full of guests, lots of celebrities, lots of friends. They had big parties till late at night. That was very loud. He was always life of the party, and like it was really hard to fall asleep when those parties were going on.
So who are some of the people that your dad knew well in the artistic
There
world?
was some famous actors at the time of the Soviet Union, Nikolai Karachentsev, for example, Mark Razovsky, the famous director. Um, Lots of friends from the Union of Composers, lots of other composers, musicians, conductors, like that knew a lot of people in Moscow.
Did he ever come into contact with Shostakovich?
Yeah, both him and mom, when they graduated, Dad actually had two master's degrees. He had a composition degree and a music theory, musicology. After his graduation, he got a job at the publishing house called Soviet Composer. And my mom, by coincidence, also got a job in the same publishing house, and I think this is how they met. Shostakovich at this time was already very sick. Mom knew his second wife, Irina. Irina was about 5 years her senior. I think they met through a conservatory with some mutual friends. They visited each other. I don't think they knew Shostakovich really closely personally, but of course he was revered in our household. His music was revered. Mom worked, like she was part of the team that worked on publishing his 15th Symphony. I think it was 1973.
Right.
So this is how their lives touched.
And so when your family came here to Canada and eventually to Toronto, did that have a big change in your father's way of composing and his way of looking at things?
Absolutely. So at the time in the Soviet Union, and this is early in Shostakovich's career, if you wanted to have good life, have privileges, you had to be a member of the Communist Party. I think Shostakovich reluctantly accepted this membership in the mid-60s to become the chairman of the Union of Russian Composers. Dad never was fond of the Communist Party. He never written about the Soviet authorities, about the revolution, Lenin, Bolsheviks. His subject matter was always lyrics, art, relationship, the human soul. For example, he wrote a cycle of romances. He wrote a lot of choral music for children's choirs, and I think it's being performed to this day in the Soviet Union. When Dad came to Canada, by chance, we met with Benny Meissner, who was a cantor at the Holy Blossom Synagogue. And they immediately became fast friends. And you would see them, taking walks in Edward Park. Every day, they always had stuff to talk about. Benny was a huge influence, of course, and Dad was always a proud Jew, but in Russia it was forbidden, basically, to talk about. So when they came to Canada, Dad always said that it felt like he's been away his whole life and finally come home. So there were some commissions from the temple, and Benny was eager to perform Dad's music and all the stuff that Dad wrote for Ben. Ben, of course, immediately premiered. And so naturally, this kind of turned Dad's attention to Jewish liturgical music, and he was really happy. And I think one of his best compositions were written here in Canada, for example, the piano trio called Jewish Dances was in 98, which was amazing. I think one of his best compositions. So his last 30 years of his life were more or less turned into the Jewish liturgical music.
Which leads me to the next question, Four Tributes of the Soul, which we are going to premiere this coming month on March the 1st. I understand from your father that it was an incredibly important piece for him to write. Do you know what it was that sparked him to write this?
I think the last movement, he had written it from scratch, and he kind of referred to it as Beethoven's Ninth, his Ode to Joy. Yeah. The first three movements were reworked from some of the earlier things that Benny premiered, but reworked substantially for orchestra and for choir, and like adding new material. And he wanted to like unite the whole thing with a theme. And I guess it's a little bit lost in translation. It may not be the attributes of the soul. It's the first four states of the soul. So that kind of, he was a little bit doubtful whether to go with states or attributes, so we decided to go with attributes.
I like the word attributes. It's an easy thing to remember. And because he also talks about devotional and the loving attribute of the soul. And the attribute is also, we think of it as being something that's positive, as something that our soul possesses. And it's one of the things that we have to cherish. He writes in one of his letters that he felt that every note that he wrote not in ink, but in blood. I found that to be really interesting. I didn't have much of a chance to get to know your father well, but the times that we did talk, he was an incredibly passionate person. And he was an incredibly intense human being. Was he like that?
Absolutely. He was very intense. He was always truth-seeking to a fault. He was very honest with, he didn't have any of those pretenses of modern society. He made lots of friends, but unfortunately, when he started telling people the truth, sometimes they didn't like it, and there was nothing he could do about it. He was very, like I said, he was a perfectionist. He was working and reworking. This score in particular, I think the last 4 years of his life, he did little corrections here and there until he was completely certain that everything is as perfect as it could be.
And so this is a great adventure. It's a great honor for Orchestra Toronto, for me personally, to be able to have this opportunity to premiere this work. I believe by looking at the score and going through it, that it's a great piece of music. And I really think it's going to be, this is a wonderful occasion for people to hear the music of a composer whose work deserves to live.
Michael, I thank you very much for being you. And I want to tell you a little story from my childhood. When Dad came to school, we had like a bring your parents to school day. So people talked about their professions, and Dad came on and started talking about composing. And his words, like, I still remember to this day, that any artistic profession, like if you're artist, you paint a painting, people can immediately see it and enjoy it. If you're a poet and you write a poem, people can read it immediately. But if you write a piece of music, nobody can hear it until there is a conductor or a kindred spirit who can read the music and understand the intention of the author and bring it to fruition. So to him, conductor is just as important as a composer. He always said that good interpretation is like recomposing and bad interpretation is like decomposing. So we're really fortunate to have you as an interpreter of Dad's music. And I think he would be immensely proud that this is being performed.
Thank you so much, Serge. As always, it's a pleasure to talk with you.